Correio Brasiliense tem a honra de entrevistar hoje a jornalista filipina Maria Ressa, uma das laureadas com o Prêmio Nobel da Paz deste ano. O Comitê Nobel norueguês a premiou pelos seus esforços, a sua luta pela liberdade de expressão, contra o uso da violência, contra o abuso de poder e o autoritarismo crescente nas Filipinas. It's an honor talking to you. Thank you so much for the interview, Mrs. Maria Ressa. Congratulations for the Nobel Prize.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, my first question, please, is for you, what is the purpose, the real role of the journalism?
You know, I think the spotlight that the Nobel Committee gave to journalists is really to show you how much harder and more dangerous it is to fulfill the role of journalism. You should know this as well in
Sure.
your country, right? So it is, the mission and purpose of journalism hasn't changed. We're governed by a set of standards and ethics. And what is the mission? In most democratic countries where journalists operate as the fourth estate, journalists are acting for the people of the democracy. We must have the courage to demand, to ask the hard questions, to demand accountability from officials, both public and private sectors, and demand transparency so that we can hold them to account. We do this on behalf of the people we serve, because at the core, and this is what the Nobel Committee pointed out, that these facts are actually at the core of any working democracy.
Okay. Have you ever expected to win the Nobel Prize? Were you very surprised about this recognition, about this award?
I was stunned. And, you know, it's funny because Oslo, the Nobel Committee, recorded the conversation, and I felt a little bit foolish in the sense that I kept saying I was speechless, but I was speaking that I was speechless, right? It's like an infinite loop. I just didn't know what to say. But at the same time, when I put down the phone, it felt like, you know, it reminded, I think, not just me and journalists in the Philippines, but journalists all around the world, that we are not alone, right? That we do our jobs, that we serve the people, and that we fulfill an important criteria in any democracy. I think the last part is that social media platforms have made it so that all content is equal, lies and facts, and its algorithms have been exploited by populist authoritarian leaders using kind of like an us against them mentality to get elected. And then once they're elected, they collapse institutions from within. What this shows us is that journalists, the stories that we do, shouldn't be lumped with, you know, the lies that's laced with anger and hate that spread faster and further than the stories that we do. Because in the end, facts are quite boring. We spend our entire career learning how to tell stories that capture our people's interest, their emotions, but nothing can beat the lies and the toxic sludge that is going through social media or in private accounts, the way journalists have been attacked. But I think what this shows you is that, you know, there's a special quality to journalists that most content creators won't have. When you call that, to lump us in with content creators is a disservice to journalists. And that special quality is courage, right? Who wants to tell someone very powerful you're wrong? Or to say, hey, you got to answer these questions. I mean, personally, do you want to do that, right? Because you know that these authoritarian style leaders are vindictive, and they will take it out on you, as they have with Rappler. I had 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years. But that core part of being a journalist, the courage, keeps you asking questions, keeps you doing investigative stories.
We're telling about the lies which are being spread around the social networks, about the social media. What is the recipe to fight fake news in your point of view?
Well, I think I think about this in three ways. We have the pillars of Rappler. This was always built into the pillars. When we created Rappler in 2012, we lived on social media. That was our main distribution platform. And as social media grew, the rest of the news organizations came onto these platforms. And then what we saw was the greed of these American technology platforms, a process, a business model that former Harvard emeritus professor Shoshana Zuboff calls surveillance capitalism, right? That our data, everything we post is harnessed by machine learning to create a model of us that knows us better than we know ourselves, and then is pulled together. I'm sorry about that. And then is pulled together by artificial intelligence to serve our weakest moment to a company, that's the new advertising, or to a government, that's the new propaganda. And each one is like a loop. It's a network effect. If you click a link that says you like government, then you're brought deeper into the funnel, because the end goal is to keep you on the site. What's the solution? Three pillars: technology, journalism, and community. The first in technology is that Rappler remains a fact-checking partner of Facebook, one of only 2 Filipino fact-checking partners. I'm also part of the Forum on Information and Democracy, which is based out of Paris, but just looking for, in November last year, we came out with a paper that came up with 250 solutions, tactical solutions, and then a dozen structural solutions. I think this whack-a-mole game of content moderation is the wrong way to go. The platform should be using the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's one. On journalism, we continue doing investigative journalism. But at the same time, I just agreed to be a co-chair for the International Fund for Public Interest Media, which is a global fund. My co-chair is the former CEO of the New York Times, Mark Thompson. This is to try to raise $1 billion a year to help independent media in countries like ours, right? So that you can change, you ask democratic nations who now give 0.3% of their ODA, their overseas developmental assistance, only 0.3%. If we can increase that to 1%, it's beyond $1 billion. And then we can help news organizations like ours survive. Finally, the last one is our community, right? All of these information operations, this is a military tactic. It's actually part of the Russian military doctrine, right? Many countries have used what they call soft tactics, soft psychological, psyops. In the age of social media, this gains far more power because we are being insidiously manipulated. Social media platforms have become behavior modification systems, and we are like Pavlov's dogs. These are real-time experiments. So that we do these stories to tell our community so they're aware of it, and it's global in scope. We did stories when the whistleblower last week, Frances Haugen, when she went in front of the Senate, because it will have an impact on us. If you have kids on Instagram, your kids will be affected the same way Americans are, the same way Filipinos are, right? So that's part of what we're doing. And I think the last part for Rappler is we're building our own tech platform. We're small, but we will be rolling it out in November. And we hope that we can, so what's the purpose of that? To be able to have fact-based, evidence-based conversations and reasoning that will help make democracy stronger.
Great. Other question here. In some nations, even at Brazil, journalism is discredited by president and his supporters. We have here the case of President Bolsonaro. No? How is it possible to reverse these trends? And do you believe that the Nobel Prize could help in that?
Absolutely. This is as much for you as it is for the Philippines. I mean, again, the tactics of calling investigative journalists, of calling journalists fake news, is how power evades accountability, right? So I hope that, let me say what I always say, which is that the real casualty in this shift in when journalists lost our gatekeeping powers to technology, the real casualty are the facts. because the algorithms of the social media platforms make facts debatable. They treat facts the same way they treat lies. In fact, they actually favor the lies in terms of distribution. This is not, and I'm going to quote a comedian, Sacha Baron Cohen, when he told the Anti-Defamation League that this is not a freedom of speech issue, which is what the platforms always say. This is a freedom of reach issue. It is a fact that lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than facts on social media, right? So they divide us and they radicalize us. That's what we see. And when you have no facts, you can't have truth. And if you don't have these things, you can't have trust. Trust is the glue that holds all human endeavor together. It's impossible. If you don't have these, it will be impossible for us to deal with the existential crisis, not just of democracy, but of the coronavirus. Brazil hasn't done such a good job on the coronavirus. Strongman leaders don't do so well, because for the coronavirus, you need to have a whole of society approach. You cannot do divide and conquer. You cannot make facts debatable. You cannot manipulate people. And then finally, I think the last one is look at climate change. We're going to have to fight this together. And I think this is where the leadership is spotlighted, right?